There is a moment in the long patience of the desert when the sun slides down and stone stops burning. The ruins of 1,000 lives cool into shades of blue and purple, and the sky deepens into an uncompromising black, a sweep of stars so bright it seems to sharpen the edges of the ancient world. It is in that light, between the settling dust and the first cold of night, that the pyramids reveal something the tourists, the looters, and the hastily told legends often miss. They are not only tombs, they are messages written in limestone and granite, sent out across earth and sky. They are made of alignment and ambition, of ritual and geometry, attempts to hold back time by meeting it halfway, one foot planted in the dirt, the other stretched toward the heavens. From a distance, the pyramids are formed pristine silhouettes against the horizon, simple and absolute. Up close, they are texture and seam. Millions of blocks, hand-dressed and notched, joints that fit so tightly they still resist wind and sand. The air tastes faintly of mineral and sun-warmed dust. Inside, passages slope and echo. The stone is cool, the light scant. In those internal spaces, the architecture becomes language. Angles, shafts, chambers, each choice of stone and space carries intention. The ancient builders were not simply burying a king. They were composing a ritual instrument, tuning a monument to the motions of the world. We begin with what we can see and measure. The Great Pyramid at Giza, built in the reign of Khufu around 4,500 years ago, faces the four cardinal points with an accuracy that has puzzled and impressed generations of surveyors. Its sides align within a fraction of a degree to north, south, east, and west. The choice to orient a massive solid to the compass is not aesthetic alone. It is a statement about order, about bringing the unpredictable world into a frame defined by human knowledge. That frame is not purely earthly. On certain nights, when the air is clean and the stars are fierce, one can feel how the pyramid's geometry converses with the sky. The ancients watched the heavens not as a theater of random lights, but as a clock and a calendar and a map of meaning. The heliacal rising of the star we call Sirius announced the inundation of the Nile, a life-giving pulse for a civilization tied to the river's mercy. The circumpolar stars, those that never set, were the imperishable ones, celestial companions that circled forever. For the Egyptians, to be among the imperishable was to escape death's cessation and join a perpetual order. Architects folded these ideas into stone. Narrow shafts from the internal chambers point to portions of the sky. Passages are angled as if to permit a soul to ascend or a spirit to find its place among the stars. Scholars debate the specifics, whether a shaft aimed at a particular star or constellations like Orion and the circumpolars was symbolic, functional, or both, but the intent is clear. A relationship between the tomb and the cosmos, between earthbound rule and eternal law. Construction itself was a ritual performance. Recent archaeology has overturned the older image of forced labor in favor of organized, skilled workforces. Teams of masons, engineers, water carriers, and sailors who lived in villages were buried nearby and left evidence of daily life. Labor left marks, graffiti in workers' pens, tool marks in the quarries, bakeries, and breweries at the base of the complexes. Building on this scale required administration and expertise, quarrying and transport, a knowledge of stone, and an ability to move it that borders on choreography. Blocks of limestone were dressed at the quarry, sledges and ropes pulled over wet sand or wooden rollers. Heavier granite pieces were hauled from Aswan hundreds of miles away. Different theories compete about ramps, straight, zigzagging, or spiral, but whatever the method, each act of hauling and placing was measured against plans, stakes, and a worldview that tied the finished monument to cosmic cycles. Inside, the pyramids are quiet, that is not empty. Corridors slope with slow intent. The so-called King's Chamber, with its massive granite beams and precisely set walls, sits like a heart in the machinery of the monument. the Queen's Chamber, and the enigmatic voids and galleries hint at ritual choreography rather than utility alone. The famous Grand Gallery rises like a place of ascent. Its proportions are deliberate, its scale designed to affect the human body moving through it. In later centuries, when inscriptions and funerary texts are found carved into walls, they clarify parts of what earlier architecture suggested: prescriptions for the afterlife, invocations to the gods, spells for transformation. The pyramid texts themselves, which appear in later Old Kingdom structures, are part of this chain, a literary map of the journey the deceased king was intended to take. Even where texts are absent, the spatial logic of the pyramids implies a staged passage from dark to light, from sealed to open, from earthly to celestial. But these monuments were public as much as private. The pyramid complexes included causeways, temples, and storerooms, spaces for priests, procession, and the community that sustained funerary cults. The pyramid was a focal point in the landscape, a vertical axis in a horizontal world. It proclaimed a relationship between ruler and cosmos. The pharaoh, even in death, was the guarantor of Ma'at, order, truth, rightness. To build such a tomb was to inscribe the ruler's power into the very geometry of the world. It is tempting to call the pyramids propaganda, but that reduces them. They are also petitions, promises, and instruments, formulations of belief made durable enough to outlast any single reign. Time, then, is essential to their message. The Egyptians conceived of cycles, the endless turning of seasons, the annual flooding of the Nile, the slow drift of the stars, as the deepest counters to the finality of death. Monumental stone could not stop entropy, but it could embody renewal. The smooth, white limestone casings that once wrapped the Giza pyramids would have flashed under the sun like a beacon, reflecting light across the terraces and the river. That gleam was part of the performance, an effect both visual and spiritual. Over millennia, the casings were stripped, the gleam is lost. But the bones remain, and with them the argument, stone that aims for immortality by anchoring itself to recurring patterns, astral, agricultural, social. There is also a humility in the pyramid's endurance. They have endured earthquakes and floods, the slow abrasion of sand and time, the repurposing of their stones for new buildings, and the long human tendency to read them as all things at once. Tomb, treasure house, astronomical observatory, misunderstood toy of aliens. Understanding them requires pruning fantasy until only the plausible remains. It requires listening to the traces left by workers, to accounts recorded on potsherds or in the inked margins of an admin log, to architecture itself as if it were an argument written in stone. In these traces, we find an Egypt that was practical and devotional, intricate and communal, a civilization that could marshal resources not simply to honor a dead king, but to map a way forward for a society that believed the cosmos could be negotiated with careful rites and precise stonework. The pyramids changed the landscape of meaning. They taught people how to arrange space around power. They taught rulers how to imagine immortality as a civic project. They became, over centuries, a vocabulary for other cultures that encountered them, from Nubians and Libyans to Arabs and Europeans. Each era read the monuments through its own filters, producing myths that stick to them like lichen, tales of curses, treasures, and outlandish engineering. Yet the real story is quieter and more astonishing. A civilization repeatedly choosing to invest its best minds and hands into objects intended to tether human life to cosmic cycles. The stones are messages because they were crafted to be read by time as much as by people, to communicate stability, order, and continuity across generations. Standing before a pyramid at dawn, or walking through its corridors at dusk, one feels the slow insistence of human resolve. You can touch the chisel marks, notice the subtle inclination of a passage, smell the sand that has filled a cavity for 3,000 years. The experience is not simply of a tomb, but of an argument. that human life is worth anchoring to something larger, that ritual and geometry form a bridge between the ephemeral and the enduring. Those who shaped these monuments measured more than stone. They measured their place in a story that reached past their lifetimes. A story about cycles, gods, kings, and the night sky's cold, indifferent order. In the end, the pyramids are both answer and question. They answer with certainty that people can build systems of meaning robust enough to last millennia. They ask whether our own monuments, cities, laws, art, carry a similar intent to connect the brief arc of an individual life to something that outlives it. When night comes and the stars move as they always have, the axes of pyramids still point, like fingers, toward the places that once defined immortality. Their surfaces weather, their stories accrete. Yet the core remains, a human decision to speak across time, to lay a message in stone that would meet the stars and through them touch something that might be called eternity. Listen closely and you can hear it. Not a voice, but the trace of many hands, the geometry of belief. The pyramids were never merely graves. They were messages cast in stone, sent to the sky with the careful hope that the living might anchor their dead, and in doing so, anchor themselves to something that outlasts the day. And so, as the night deepens and the desert air cools, the pyramids keep speaking, unable to shout but perfectly composed, waiting for whoever will read the message next.